Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I'm your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 35 of the 2024 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects to get you ready for the NFL draft. And this is the second episode of the post-NFL draft edition of the Ready for the Draft podcast. Last podcast, we really took a look at every draft pick from the first 16 teams alphabetically. So that's starting with the Arizona Cardinals, finishing with the Kansas City Chiefs. So we're going to pick up where we left off. We're going to go ahead and start with the Los Angeles Chargers, work our way all the way through to the Washington Commanders, take a look at every single pick, give you my thoughts on really where everything landed, and take a look at these rosters and really kind of give us a good idea going into rookie camp, mini camps, training camp. What are the positional battles to be on the lookout for as well? So let's go ahead, jump right into things, and take a look at the Los Angeles Chargers, who sitting there at number 5 overall. That was really the big question, was what were the Chargers going to do? I think for a while we were thinking maybe it would be Brock Bowers. Get that unique tight end. We know that Jim Harbaugh loves his tight ends. Maybe that's where Brock Bowers would land, especially because Justin Herbert needed a go-to number 1 wideout. Well, after signing Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst, I think that really kind of took that direction out. But then looking at that receiver spot, right? I mean, when you look at Quentin Johnson and Joshua Palmer, you needed to find somebody else, another receiver that you could pencil in there. And so it would be hard to pass on Malik Nabers or Rome Odunze, but we know what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. He wants to bring that physicality to the team, bring physicality to that running game, physical game, right? I mean, you already have Rashawn Slater at left tackle, Zion Johnson and Jamari Sawyer at the guards, Corey Linsley at center. You need that right tackle. And so what I was thinking with this was, if the Chargers were to trade down, because Minnesota looking to trade up to get a quarterback, weren't expecting them to only have to make a deal to move up one spot. But still, when we look at this, I was thinking J.C. Latham as that right tackle, if they were to fall, if they were to come down, because there's always that chance that Joe Ortiz could be looking at getting some additional picks because of the fact that, hey, there are a lot of need areas on this roster, but ultimately they stand firm and they get the number 1 offensive tackle, which makes perfect sense. Joe Alt is a technician. He's tremendously athletic for a guy his size. And I mean, yes, he's 6'9" and 321 pounds, but the leverage, he does a great job with his pad level, moves extremely well. Look, this guy's a converted tight end, so you get him there at right tackle with Rashawn Slater on the opposite side. This is really a team. And then, Trey Pipkins, he's 1 year removed from having a really good year, so you've got a nice swing tackle there as well. So I really look at the Chargers. They've solidified everything up front, from the tight ends with Dissly and Hurst, excellent blockers with that offensive line. Jim Harbaugh gets exactly what he's looking for. Then in round number 2, they trade up to get a guy that I honestly looked at and said he could have been a first rounder. I actually had him penciled in with the Chargers, and that's Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. You look at his measurables, you look at the 40 time, and they're comparable to Garrett Wilson. This is a guy who could absolutely be a number 1 at the next level. That's what's crazy about this. And he reminds me with the route running of Cooper Kupp, because Cooper Kupp was a guy, or Terry McLaurin is another one. The route running ability is just it's silly just how guys aren't able to cover him. And that was one of the things that I was looking for at the Senior Bowl, was who's going to be this year's Cooper Kupp? Who's going to be this year's Terry McLaurin? A guy that just nobody could hang with. And that's exactly what Ladd McConkey was able to bring there. Can Justin Herbert, Jim Harbaugh and company, and offensive coordinator Greg Roman get more out of Quentin Johnson? That's going to be a question mark. But this is a team that's going to want to run the football first and foremost. So taking some pressure off of these young wideouts, I think, will be the best thing for them. Then in round 3, this is ultimately where I thought maybe Blake Corum was going to get penciled in here. I thought that would be a match made in heaven, with Jim Harbaugh getting his running back. Ultimately, they waited until round number 6, and I still think they get a solid running back there to back up Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Look at that. A couple of Baltimore Ravens. John Harbaugh, Jim's brother, coached both of those guys in Baltimore. So, it's interesting to see what Jim is doing here with that. But what he ultimately does, Jesse Minter is his defensive coordinator, who also was a defensive coordinator there at Michigan. Won the national title last year. And this is a linebacking core. When you look at it, they lost Kenneth Murray, so obviously this is a need area. You've got Deion Henley and Denzel Perryman on the roster, but you bring in a guy like Junior Colson. And Junior Colson, obviously, he understands the defense there, at 6'2", 238 pounds. This is a guy, look, he started 36 games, and led the team in tackles in each of the last 2 seasons. This is a guy that moves well laterally, can drop into coverage. This is a guy, to me, when I look at this, he's a guy that's going to fill a need area. He's going to battle Perryman and Henley for a starting spot. I think ultimately he ends up edging out Denzel Perryman on the right side with Henley on the left. Gives them a couple of very athletic linebackers, and I think that's really a nice group there for Minter. Along the interior, that Nick Neiman is another guy that is going to get a lot of playing time there in that group. Then you fast forward to day number 3, and look, when you look at this defensive line, Morgan Fox is kind of an undersized defensive end. You've got Puna Ford there at D tackle. Tuda Obanaya is your nose tackle. You need to get some guys up front. You need to get some beef up front, and they do that with Justin Eboigbe. Look, 6'4", 297 pounds. This is a dude who does a great job holding the point, locks those arms out, and then can shed and make a play. But this is also a guy that showcased his ability to put on really a stellar bull rush. And, he was kind of more of a role player coming into the 2023 season. And then he has a breakout year, and that was really the big thing for me that I was looking for with it. 11.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 64 total tackles. Really just had that breakout year, and I think his best football is ahead of him. I wouldn't be surprised if Eboigbe, Puna may end up sliding to that nose tackle spot, and Eboigbe ends up playing D tackle. I could even see Eboigbe moving over, and you could have Eboigbe, Obanaya, and Ford across that front as well. I think he's got some versatility there. Then you get, I knew that the Chargers were going to look for a corner, especially to try to replace Michael Davis, because you look at Christian Fulton, I just don't think that's going to be the right answer there. And they get 2 corners, really just 4 picks apart. Tarheeb Still from Maryland, I thought that was a bit high for him, 6 foot, 189 pounds. This is a guy that, 5 interceptions a season ago, tied for 6th in the country. Does a good job tracking the football well. Look, he was solid punt returner there for the Terps, reliable tackler, especially in run support. I look at him; he's probably a guy that's going to battle Jasir Taylor for that nickel spot. And then Cam Hart from Notre Dame. This is the guy for me. I mean, it's 6'3", 202. I thought maybe he would end up being a safety at the next level. I think he does a good job driving downhill in off coverage. This is a guy that looks to get physical and press coverage. But here's the thing that's surprising for me was his ability to stay with guys, especially through their transitions, cut on a dime, and plant and actually be very sticky. We saw that at the Senior Bowl. Very impressed by that. He's got a ton of length. That was a great pickup there in round number 5. I think he ultimately ends up beating out Christian Fulton and ends up being the starter opposite Asante Samuel. Now, I mentioned the running back in round number 6, and that's Kamani Vidal out of Troy. 5'8", 213 pounds. This dude, over 1,600 yards, 1,661 to be exact. Second most in the FBS. This is a dude who, look, just give him a seam and he's able to take it the distance. Just really good top-end speed. And then a guy that, look, that low center of gravity, being just 5'8", but he's a bowling ball. He's a guy that's going to bounce off tackles, excellent contact balance, continues to move the pile forward. Good vision. I think he's a good pass catcher as well. But it's his pass blocking ability that I think is really going to help him out. And look, I thought that there was really a nice move when they brought in both Dobbins and Edwards. Edwards is going to give you a lot of that power running game. Dobbins, the big question mark is health. Can he stay healthy? I think, Vidal, we could very well see him getting a lot more playing time. 92 receptions in his career for the Troy Trojans. Again, I thought this was a great pick for the Chargers. And then you get to the two receivers in round number 7. So they go back to the well. They look for another couple of receivers. How Brendan Rice fell all the way to round number 7, I have no idea. This dude was a touchdown maker for Caleb Williams there at USC. The bloodlines, Jerry Rice's son. I mean, how do you bet against those type of bloodlines, right? Those genes. But 12 touchdowns a season ago, 17.6 yards per reception. He's a big physical receiver. He's 6'2", 208. Runs good routes, strong hands. Here's the biggest thing. He needs to be able to make those catches through contact. That was where he really struggled. I think it was just 25%. The actual drop rate, I think he only dropped 2 passes, but the contested catch, that's where he was struggling a season ago. But look, at the Senior Bowl, he showed no signs of having any of those problems. So I thought that was a great pick. And then look, Michigan again. Jim Harbaugh getting another Michigan Wolverine, 6'3", 212-pound Cornelius Johnson. This is a guy who's got actually decent speed. He was able to show that. So he could be a vertical threat, a guy that's going to work underneath as well. Has that frame to box out defenders. Both he and Brendan Rice could be guys that could be exceptional in the red zone. But here's the thing. You've got Joshua Palmer, Quentin Johnston, Lab McConkey. Those guys are probably going to be your starters. DJ Chark was signed. So he's another guy that I think you could probably pencil in here. Then there's Darius Davis, who's going to be your return specialist. And then, Brendan Rice. So Cornelius Johnson, are they really going to carry 7 receivers? Likely not. So Johnson is one of those guys that I think could end up being a practice squad guy. At some point, there's, what's going to happen with Quentin Johnston. I think, Cornelius Johnson is more of an insurance policy here for the Chargers. So I think at the end of the day, this is a good move. The one thing, you look at the tight end spot, they didn't go with a tight end here, but with Disley and Hurst, they've got Donald Parham there on the roster as well. What's that going to look like? So I'm curious to see how that all plays out. But here's one other thing that's interesting is their fullback, Ben Mason. That dude was an absolute stud for Jim Harbaugh. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch as well. Just that ground and pound smash mouth football. Watch number 44 for the Chargers this year as that lead blocker for Dobbins, Edwards, Vidal. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. It's going to be a bit of a throwback. Which takes us to the LA Rams. LA Rams. This is where I actually mocked Jared Verse coming off the board here. I thought maybe we could see Byron Murphy II. Ultimately, he comes off the board just a couple of picks before them to the Seahawks at number 16. So at number 19 overall, getting Jared Verse, I said it before, when Aaron Donald was there with Von Miller and Byron Young getting after the quarterback, they won a Super Bowl, right? Because you had the interior presence and a couple of guys coming off the edge. Now with Jared Verse and Byron Young supporting Kobe Turner, Kobe Turner is first going to have to prove that he can get the job done without AD next to him. If he can still be the guy there as that interior presence with Verse and Young coming off the edge, then you really have something there. Then they go back to the Florida State well, which I love this pick. Yes, they traded up. Yes, they ended up maybe giving up a little bit too much. But at the same time, I look at this. Now you've got Braden Fisk on this team too. And this is a guy that is so explosive with that 4.78 40. This is a guy that is so quick getting up the field. And I thought that he played so well, complimented Jared Verse very well. You get Verse coming off the edge, you have force guys right into Fisk, or Fisk with force guys back outside right into Verse. This is a guy, 36 tackles for loss in his career, 19.5 sacks, including 6 this past season at FSU after he transferred there after 4 seasons with the Western Michigan Broncos. And I love this pick. I look at this, you talk about the Rams, what do you got? Fisk, Turner, Verse, Young. Those are guys that I think can get after the quarterback, and that's really what the Rams are looking for. I think they've done a tremendous job upgrading that defense, especially when you lose a guy like AD. You can't hope to replace a guy like that, but really what you're going to do is you're going to have to at least find some additional bodies that are going to be able to make their presence felt in opposing backfields. Off to a great start. Then in round number 3, they get Blake Corum, the running back out of Michigan. Spoke of him, previously. Kyron Williams was a 1,000-yard rusher a season ago, but with Ronnie Rivers, Zach Evans, Boston Scott on the roster, they needed another running back, a guy that was going to be able to spell Williams, a guy that can catch the football out of the backfield, be a decent pass blocker, and a guy that has a nose for the end zone. Blake Corum is a guy that can be a short yardage, red zone, goal line type running back. He's a guy that excellent vision. The jump cuts are back after the torn ACL. He's not a guy that's going to be a burner. He's not going to fly by you by any means. But look, 7th in the Heisman in 2022, 9th in the Heisman in 2023, and this past season, 27 touchdowns on the ground, 58 in his career, 56 receptions for Blake Corum as well. So I thought this was a great pick, great value there in round number 3. Then they trade, up, and they get Cam Kinchins. Cam Kinchins, good Lord. I mean, this is a guy that was just tremendous safety for the Hurricanes. And you saw just tremendous range. A guy with 11 interceptions, 15 pass breakups in his career. Yeah, you're going to look at the 40 time and you're going to be, man, he runs in the 4.6s. How can you sit there and justify taking that guy? Is he too stiff? What's going on? He doesn't have that straight line speed. This guy covered a ton of ground. And look, you can sit there and talk about 40 times all you want. Look at Kyle Hamilton and what Kyle Hamilton has done, right? And I look at Cam Kinchins. He was a guy that I had coming off the board in round number 2. Then he runs that 4.65 40, falls to round 3. I mean, Rams actually get him at a discount at the end of round number 3, which is absolutely crazy. But I look at it, he's going to be a starter. I've got news for you. In 3 out of your 4 picks, you get 3 defensive starters. Fisk at D-end, Verse at outside linebacker, and Cam Kinchins, I think, will end up playing next to Cam Curl at that free safety spot. Then round number 5, they get Brendan Jackson out of Washington State. I'm a big fan of Brendan Jackson. This was a guy that I thought brought physicality there to the Washington Cougar defense, a guy that can get pressure on the quarterback, get into the backfield, 6'4", 255, 8.5 sacks this past season, 20.5 sacks in his career with the Cougs. He's a guy that's going to provide some depth. I think he'll be battling with the likes of Nick Hampton, Michael Hoyt, to be one of those guys coming off the bench to spell Verse and Young. Then they go with Tyler Davis from Clemson. 6th round pick. I'm really surprised that he lasted all the way to the 6th round. 6'2", 301. I know that the injuries played a factor in it. Plus, he played 52 games in his career. But this is a guy, look, he's got that low center of gravity, really a quick burst. And when Tyler Davis was healthy at Clemson, he was a guy that could end up being a game changer. And there were some times where he was making more of an impact than even Brian Bresee, who was a first-round pick a season ago with the Saints. So you look at it as a true freshman, 6.5 sacks, 10.5 tackles for loss. Then in 2022, another healthy year, 9.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. When he is healthy and he is on, he could be a force. And that's the thing. You put him there, you have him back up, Kobe Turner there at the defensive tackle spot. I think that's really a great pick and a guy that I think can make a lot of plays around the line of scrimmage. Excellent pick, excellent value there in round 6. I mocked the Rams taking a kicker. They take Joshua McCarty. That's exactly who I had them taking in round number 6. Tanner Brown was brought in. I know they had Lucas Haversick a season ago. Josh McCarty's going to end up taking over that starting job, and he's not going to let it go. I think he's going to be their starter there for a long time. Jordan Whittington out of Texas. This was kind of an odd pick for me. I thought that there were other receivers. If you're going to go with a bigger receiver, I would have actually gone with Brendan Rice. But Jordan Whittington, look, 6'1", 206, really kind of that fourth or fifth wheel on that offense there with the Longhorns, because he was behind Xavier Worthy, he was behind Adonai Mitchell, also Jatavian Sanders, and then you had Jonathan Brooks ahead of Jordan Whittington. So the fact that they ended up taking him in round number 6, a little bit of a surprise. I look at the Rams, they're pretty much set at 5 of the spots, right? Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell. Really, those are the 4. I think after that, you got Tyler Johnson as a 5th. They released Ben Skoranek So maybe that opens the door for Jordan Whittington. I think there's one or two undrafted free agents, especially I'm looking at Drake Stoops. I know we're not going to talk about the undrafted free agents until next podcast, but keep an eye out for Drake Stoops. I think he has a great chance to make the LA roster. And then you get Bo Limmer in round 6, another great value. This is a guy that can play both guard and center. Obviously, they brought in Jonah Jackson. They've got Kevin Dotson. Steve Avila's moved over to the pivot. So Limmer, excellent depth. And then they get KT Leviston out of K-State, a guy who was a left tackle there. Not the most imposing athlete, a guy that I think needs to kick inside to guard. So again, gives you a lot of depth. Joe Nilboom, Warren McClendon at the tackles. You got Logan Bruss, Leviston, Limmer along the interior of that line. They're really starting to solidify both of the lines, and that's something that I think was definitely a neat area, and I think the Rams were able to absolutely address that. Did they need a tackle? I think they're okay right now. Maybe that right tackle spot, Rob Havenstein, staying healthy is going to be the big key for them. But I think at the end of the day, the Rams did a great job with their draft. So then you look at the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Las Vegas Raiders, I think they were sitting there hoping that they would get a quarterback. And when ultimately somehow 6 quarterbacks were taken in the first 12 picks, the Raiders are sitting there going, well, we've got Gardner Minshew, we've got Aiden O'Connell. We're not going to reach for a quarterback. We're definitely not going to do that. Let's get the best player available, and they take Brock Bowers. You already have Michael Mayer on the roster, but now you've got Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer with Devontae Adams. Jacoby Myers had a solid year a season ago as well, so I thought that was really a good pickup. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a guy that can end up being the focal point of your offense. I mean, look at what KC has done with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce, I mean, good Lord. I mean, year after year, the clutch plays. Then you look at round number 2. They take Jackson Powers Johnson. This was an interesting pick because I think what's going to happen with Andre James. Andre James is going to be your center, which means Jackson Powers Johnson, who has experience at guard, will likely be your right guard with Dylan Parham playing the left guard. What's interesting with the Raiders is Parham was also a center. He's playing guard, so I think Jackson Powers Johnson, JPJ, will see some of that physicality there at the guard spot. Delmar Glaze in round 3. I don't think Glaze is going to beat out Thayer Mumford. I thought Thayer Mumford held his own at that right tackle spot. That's why I ultimately didn't go with the tackle for them. They also brought in Andrus Peat to back up Colton Miller. He's also a guy, keep an eye on him, and Cody Whitehair potentially battling for a starting spot as well on the interior of the line. But Delmar Glaze, to me, I think he struggles with some speed and some quickness. He did well at the Senior Bowl, which I think kind of helped that draft stock a little bit, but I had him as a day 3 guy. DeCameron Richardson. This is a guy, he's a 6'2 corner, but so explosive. Had the second quickest 10-yard split in the combine, which is absolutely ridiculous for a guy his size, 6'2", to get out of the block so quickly. He's a good tackler, a guy that has tremendous ball skills. So I look at him and the corner spot. I would have liked to have seen them go with the corner even earlier in one of their first 3 picks, but I know really addressing that offensive line was going to be a priority. But again, corner, you got Jack Jones, you've got Jacorian Bennett, Nate Hobbs. I really think that they needed somebody to push Jacorian Bennett for that starting spot. Maybe Richardson's able to be that guy. Round 5, you get Tommy Eichenberg. And I look at Divine Diablo. Eichenberg is a nice backup there and a guy that maybe could push for some playing time in that role. I think if nothing else, Tommy Eichenberg is going to be a nice special teams ace. 5th round feels about right. I had him in the 5th to 6th, so that makes a lot of sense there. Dylan Lobby, look, you look at the running back spot here. Zamir White, Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah. There's no Josh Jacobs, so it's clearly going to be a running back by committee. Would have thought they would have gone after running back sooner as well. But Dylan Lobby is a guy that, he's a receiver in a running back body. I mean, he's really a guy that could be your Danny Woodhead. I really think so, because this is a guy that just catches a ton of passes, runs excellent routes. He's going to find a way to get on the field early. Round 7, look, one of the picks that I loved was the pick of Trey Taylor, the Air Force safety, Jim Thorpe Award winner, 5'10", 209. I had said, look, I was surprised that he didn't get the invite to the combine, but I look at him. He's the guy that I think could end up challenging Marcus Epps at that free safety spot. I really do. When it's all said and done, this is a guy that can be a big hitter. He's got a lot of range. Comes downhill, will meet meet the running backs in a hole. And look, he has 3 interceptions, returned 1 for a touchdown this last season. Really like that pick. And then they go back to the cornerback spot. They double up because look, they need. It's more or less right now. It's more quantity than overall quality, I think. But I think they're really looking to see who can step up in this group. And MJ Devonshire out of Pitt. He's speedy. He's 5'11", 186 pounds. A guy that attacks the football well in the air, excellent ball skills, one of the leaders in the ACC in pass breakups. So he's a guy to keep an eye on to potentially make the team as maybe the 5th or 6th corner. Miami. Now, Miami, I really thought they were going to address the offensive line in round number 1. I look at a guy like Graham Barton. I thought Graham Barton would have really helped solidify things along the interior of that line, whether it was guard or center. But at the same time, there are some worries and legitimate concerns about Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. So these are guys who, Phillips tore the Achilles, Bradley Chubb tore his ACL, and so obviously that's going to be a huge concern. And will both of those guys even be back on the field to start the 2024 season? Big question mark there. So obviously, Chop Robinson, not upset with this pick at all there at number 21 overall. The production doesn't match the athleticism there with Chop Robinson. I think that's a little bit of some frustration there. But the explosiveness, you cannot deny that with Chop. I mean, 4'4", 840 with a 154 10-yard split at 6'3" and 254 pounds. Remarkable. This is a guy that I think getting to play with the likes of Phillips and Chubb, Shaq Barrett as well. He can really learn from some really good veteran edge rushers, and I think that would really help him. Patrick Paul. I look at this pick, and I think this is building for the future. Because you've got Austin Jackson on the right side. Terron Armstead is your left tackle, but Terron Armstead is starting to get up there in age, right? This is a guy who's already 32 years of age. What's the longevity there? Patrick Paul, I think he's got the measurables, insanely long arms. He's 6'7". He is a bit of a project. I still thought that he was a guy that could end up battling for a starting spot early in his career, and I think he still can. I think ultimately he'll learn from Armstead and be his eventual heir apparent. You look at Jalen Wright in round number 4. Here's the thing. I thought they were going to go after a running back in last year's draft, a bigger back, and they wound up going with Devin Achane. Achane. So now you've got Raheem Mostert, you've got Achane, you've got Ahmed, Jeff Wilson. They throw a lot of running backs at you. Now they get Jalen Wright in the mix. Really surprised Jalen Wright fell to the 4th round. You look at him; he doesn't have a ton of wear on his legs because let's face it, this is a guy that he shared the backfield with Jabari Small. 4'3", 840 at 5'10", 210 pounds. He's a threat to go the distance on any given play. So I look at him. The big question mark is you've got these other running backs. You just drafted Achane before. What makes sense here? Is this ultimately are we still looking at a running back by committee? What's the intention here? What's the intent with drafting Jalen Wright? When you already have Mostert, you have Achane, Ahmed and Wilson have also filled in really well. Really kind of an odd pick for me there in round number 4. Round 5, though, I think is excellent value to get Mohamed Kamara. Mohamed Kamara, if you watch that game against Colorado, this guy was just a heat-seeking missile going after Shedeur Sanders. Was always living in the backfield. 45.5 tackles for loss, 29.5 sacks, including 13 this past season. 5 forced fumbles in his career as well. This is a guy, he's undersized, but dude can bend. Dude can bend and come off the edge in a hurry. Again, 6'1", 248, but ran a 4.5, 740. Incredibly explosive. Powerful as well. That's the other thing. He plays with excellent leverage, heavy-handed, can drive guys back into the backfield because low man wins. And so when you look at this edge rush group now, with Phillips and Chubb maybe not starting the 2024 season, what they've really done now is they've given themselves some additional ammo there, because you got Chop Robinson, you got Shaq Barrett, and Mohamed Kamara. If you get all 5 guys in there, then you can just start rotating guys out, which is really nice, especially when you have guys coming off injury. And if those two, Phillips and Chubb, aren't able to get back to start out the year, then you've got 2 rookies that will have to be playing a huge role in this defense. Malik Washington, Taj Washington, taken in the 6th and 7th round. You get 2 receivers to add to this group. Now, when you look at it, this isn't, it was interesting. We took 2 receivers there towards the end of the draft. You already have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. OBJ has also been signed as well. So obviously those 3 picks are solidified. Eric Ezukama hasn't really shown a whole lot to this point. But again, that was just a pick from last year. River Craycraft and Braxton Berrios, a couple of overachievers there. But with Malik Washington, he's the diminutive receiver, a guy from Virginia, that absolutely balled out, 5'9", 191, but ended up with 110 catches this past season for the Cavaliers, and was a transfer from Northwestern. And look, he had his best year at an underperforming Virginia team, and 1,426 yards, 9 touchdowns, quicker than he is fast. And then Taj Washington was the guy, look, he was the leader of that receiving core there at USC, was the go-to guy for Caleb Williams, was always finding a way to get himself open. 18 yards per reception, 8 touchdowns on a 1,000-yard season for Taj Washington. He's the guy for me that even if he doesn't make the roster here in Miami, he's going to find his way onto a roster somewhere. Because I think his talent, his route running ability, his ability to get open, his reliability with his hands, he's a guy that, look, I thought he was going to get drafted a couple rounds higher. Let's be perfectly honest there. Then you look at Patrick McMorris, the second pick in round number 6. Jordan Poyer and Javon Holland are solidified as the starters there. We know this, but when we look at Patrick McMorris, a veteran presence in the secondary there at Cal, transferring from San Diego State. 90 tackles this past season, 6 interceptions, 23 pass breakups in his career at the safety spot. So excellent ball skills, instinctive as well. I think he's the guy that's going to find his way onto the roster there in Miami as that number 3 safety. Which takes us to Minnesota. J.J. McCarthy at number 10. I mean, I mocked it. I figured this was going to happen. Minnesota. I look at J.J. McCarthy, the athleticism, his ability, obviously, with a lot of the play action and the rolling out. He just fits. I mean, he looks kind of like Kevin O'Connell when he was a quarterback, right? Coming out of college. I look at McCarthy, though. You've got the perfect bridge quarterback in Sam Darnold, and then J.J. McCarthy. This is a guy that I wasn't as high on, but I needed to watch more game film. Ultimately, I feel like this is a guy that he's a bit of a boomer bust type of a kid. Because he wasn't really given the keys to really turn things loose. So a lot of it is a projection. You can look at it, you can see that the traits are absolutely there. So it'll be interesting to see what Kevin O'Connell can do there with J.J. McCarthy. Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner fell all the way to number 17. How in the world did that happen? We thought that Dallas Turner could potentially come off the board at number 8 overall to Atlanta. They end up getting him there at number 17 overall. Yes, you lose Danielle Hunter, but you bring in Jonathan Grenard, you bring in Andrew Van Ginkel, a couple of guys that have proven to be able to get after the quarterback. Grenard was the leading sack artist there for Houston a season ago, even with Will Anderson Jr. on the roster. I look at Dallas Turner. I think he's a guy that's going to push for playing time. I think he could potentially be the right outside linebacker opposite Jonathan Grenard, as early as week 1. That's going to be an interesting battle, I think, for sure. Then in round number 4, Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon. Again, the transfer from Alabama. I look at him. Byron Murphy, I think, is entrenched over on one side. You got Mekhi Blackman as well. Caleb Evans. Kyrie Jackson, tremendous length. I think he's a guy that is just going to be there, provide that good depth. They do have Andrew Booth as well. So this is just really a depth piece. He's a guy that I think is still a little raw as well. Not a ton of starting experience. So like the value there, though. Walter Rouse, another guy with excellent value at the top of round number 6. First pick in round 6. A guy that I think can play both tackle spots. Could be the backup there for Christian Darrisaw. But I think he could also move to the right side and help out Brian O'Neill if need be. Round 6, you get Will Reichard, the kicker out of Alabama. This was a guy that just seemed to be automatic for the Tide. He's the guy. Look, John Parker Romo is the other kicker there. I think Reichard is solidified as their guy there in round number 6. Round 7, Michael Juergens, the center. I was kind of surprised that Juergens was going to get drafted. Look, he's a veteran presence. Don't get me wrong there. With the Demon Deacons, I actually liked Michael Juergens. We just didn't see a whole lot from him, especially during the postseason. We didn't really see Michael Juergens' name out there a whole lot, but I thought he was a guy that, look, Wake Forest, he started 34 games. He was excellent in run blocking. Average athlete, but again, he was a guy that was a mainstay up there up front and one of the better offensive linemen in the ACC. He'll back up Garrett Bradbury. So again, a couple of depth pieces on the roster there. And then finally, Levi Drake Rodriguez. Don't really know a whole lot about this guy. He's 6'1", 269, but had 5.5 sacks and a forced fumble in 2023. He's a guy that, undersized for sure. But what type of position are we talking about here? You look at that nose tackle spot. They need depth behind Harrison Phillips. They could have gone after a nose tackle earlier in the draft. Levi Drake Rodriguez, could he potentially fill that role? That remains to be seen. He is a bit undersized, so that's going to be the big question mark there. Patriots. All this talk about maybe them not taking a quarterback. What are we talking about here? Drake May coming in. Look, he can sit behind Jacoby Brissett, and he doesn't have to be the guy right away. I think that's perfect for him, and I love the situation, the setup there. Gerard Mayo gets a quarterback, Alex Van Pelt. I think he'll do a lot of good things there with Drake May. In round number 2, all the receivers that came off the board, the Patriots were kind of sitting there waiting for a guy that could potentially be a number 1. They've got Demario Douglas as a 1. You look at Jalen Polk from Washington. This was a guy that, look, he stepped up in a big way when Jalen McMillan went down to injury. Was a number 2 there for Rome Odunze. To me, he feels like a 2. They also get Javon Baker in round 4 out of UCF. This guy attacks the football in the air. Excellent body control, excellent ball skills. The 50-50 assassin, if you will. He's a guy that I think could challenge for a starting spot there as well. Caden Wallace in round 3. I was surprised that the Patriots didn't try to trade up to get one of the tackles. Kind of, Caden Wallace. Is he? What's the story there with him? Is he going to start? You've got Michael Onwenu as well. Chukwuma Okorafor. But who's really going to play that left tackle spot? That's really going to be the big question mark. Is Caden Wallace, going to be able to make that move over there to the left side? That's going to be a huge question mark. I thought they could have could have traded back into round number 2 and gotten one of those offensive tackles. Pull the trigger before they're really set on Caden Wallace. But look, the Patriots, they're known for this. Even when Belichick was there, they went after Cole Strange in round number 1. And Cole Strange has ended up developing into a solid offensive lineman. They got Michael Onwenu in the 6th round a couple of years ago. So getting Caden Wallace in round number 3 to be your left tackle, although it's unconventional, I wouldn't put it past the Patriots at this point. Just that organization, there's something about what they're able to do up front on the offensive line. Leighton Robinson in round 4. Leighton Robinson is a physical guard, very physical. I look at City Sal right now as that right guard. I think Leighton Robinson is going to compete with him there. If nothing else, it'd be a solid backup. Round 6, Marcellus Dial, good ball skills there at the cornerback spot. This is a guy 6 foot, 190 pounds. 31 pass defended. Over the last 3 years. So this is a guy. I look at Jonathan Jones. Marcellus Dial will be that number 3 corner, but could he potentially push Jones for a starting spot at some point? Round 6, probably not early on, but he's a guy that I think has that potential to develop. Interestingly enough, the Patriots also get Joe Milton. This guy's more of a project. I think he's the guy that Jacoby Brissett, Bailey Zappi, these are guys that are going to have to support Milton through the whole process. Interesting that they took him there in round number 6. It doesn't feel like what Washington did with RG3 and Kirk Cousins by any means, because Joe Milton is such a project. But he's a guy that I think when they're looking at things, Jacoby Brissett isn't part of their long term. So if you've got May, Zappi, and Milton, those are probably your three quarterbacks, really long term going forward. And then Jaheim Bell, falling all the way to round 7. Reason why? Well, he's undersized. He's 6'2", 241 pounds. He's not the most explosive guy by any means, but he's versatile. He can play tight end. He can play fullback. He can do a lot of different things for you. You got Hunter Henry. You got Austin Hooper on the roster. They're both signed to one-year deals, I want to say. So Jaheim Bell can end up being the number 3 tight end, potentially move up in that rotation. And look, if you need another running back, two-back set with Ramondre Stevenson or Antonio Gibson or Kevin Harris, Jaheim Bell could end up playing that role, can also be the H-back, so he gives you a lot of versatility there. Round 7 is about right just because he's undersized. When you look at New Orleans, I had a feeling they were going to take an offensive tackle. I just picked the wrong offensive tackle. Taliesin Fuaga, I had him penciled in there at one point, and really when I look at him, is he a left tackle? Is he a right tackle? What's interesting is I'm seeing from a lot of publications that Taliesin Fuaga potentially could end up playing left tackle and start in place of Trevor Penning. His natural position is right tackle. Ryan Ramczyk, obviously battling injuries. That's a huge concern. But when I look at Fuaga, he's a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker. You watch his technique. You watch his physicality. You watch his ability to move so well in his hands, plays with excellent leverage. Fuaga, maybe because of that, because he's really a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker at this point, maybe he can make the transition to a left tackle spot, which would end up, especially if he can ball out, from being drafted there at the number 14 overall pick. Look, you look at a guy like Tristan Wirfs, being able to move on either side of the line. It'll be interesting to see, because he was taken number 14 overall by the Bucks a few years ago. Taliesin Fuaga could end up potentially being that same type of player. Round 2, excellent value, getting Kool-Aid McKinstry. This is a guy, look, he's battled some injuries, but when I look at this group, you've got Marshawn Lattimore, Alontae Taylor's played well at the nickel spot, and then Paulson Adebo opposite Lattimore on the outside. Kool-Aid McKinstry is the guy that's going to battle Adebo, I think, for a starting spot. If nothing else, he'd be that nice third corner there on the outside. Then Saints have to wait. They sit and wait till round number 5, and they take Spencer Rattler. They just drafted Jake Haener, and everyone was thinking, well, Jake Haener could end up being the next Brock Purdy. And then they end up taking Spencer Rattler. You've got Derek Carr under contract. There is Jake Haener as well. Spencer Rattler is a guy that I think could potentially play out the next level because he's got that big arm. He's gotten better each and every year. When he's good, when he is on, this kid is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And I think he's closer to that group of 6 than really what we're showing with this draft pick. He's a guy to me that it's going to be interesting, that battle with him and Haener for that backup spot to Derek Carr. Round 5, they get Bub Means. Look, they needed a receiver, absolutely. You got Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. You drafted A.T. Perry a season ago, but you lose Michael Thomas Jr. That's a huge miss there. Obviously, with Michael Thomas Jr. He was a guy that was he was a focal point there. 1,000-yard receiver, but released, no longer on the roster. Bub Means at 6'1", 212 pounds, big play threat, a guy that can get deep, excellent hands, big catch radius. He'll be a guy that I think will battle A.T. Perry for that starting spot eventually. In round 5, they get Jalen Ford. I look at this team, and you have Pete Werner, you got DeMario Davis, you got Willie Gay that you signed. You also brought in Khaleke Hudson. You've already got DeMarco Jackson on the roster, who's possibly, I thought was going to end up being the heir apparent to DeMario Davis. But when you look at Jalen Ford, he's really a Mike in a 43 defense. I think he's the guy that's ultimately going to back up DeMario Davis, with DeMarco Jackson likely moving to the will and backing up Pete Werner. Round 6, one of my favorite guys in day 3, and that's Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa, 6'4", 312 pounds. This dude is so physical at the point of attack. Just drives guys back into the backfield. I look at him, and you look at the D-line. Nathan Shepard, Kalen Saunders, Brian Bresee. Christian Boyd is a guy that I think, look, the Saints have these. Kalen Saunders played at Western Illinois. Nathan Shepard played at Fort Hays State. So, you bring in a guy like Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa, it just kind of fits that same bill. And a guy that I think is going to work hard to, really establish the point of attack, a guy that's super physical, wants to overpower you. So I love that pick there along the interior of the line. And then they get Josiah Izarim out of Eastern Kentucky. 6'6", 329 pounds, started at the D-line, moved to the O-line in 2021, started 19 games. He's a developmental prospect. So he's a guy that, you got Penning, you got Ramczyk, and obviously Fuaga. Izarim is a guy that, you'll have to work with for a while, but a guy that could potentially, stranger things have happened. But when you're looking for developmental guys, round 7, that's where they're going to go. So Josiah Izarim, that makes a lot of sense. Look, I thought they were going to go with an edge rusher. I really did. I mean, yes, you drafted or you signed Chase Young. You've got Cameron Jordan there on the roster. Carl Granderson was the guy that was really the bell cow there, if you will. If there is a bell cow for edge rushers, but he was the guy that led the group with, I think, 9.5 sacks. You've got Tano Passanio, Isaiah Foskey, but look, not a whole lot of production out of this edge rush spot. Peyton Turner, first round bust. So, the likelihood, should they have gone after an edge rusher, I think at some point they probably should have in the draft. That's the only thing that I really think that they missed on there. That and probably going after a receiver earlier. So then we look at the Giants, New York Football Giants, right, as Chris Berman calls them. And I think everybody was talking about the quarterback spot. I didn't see this as a spot that they would address, at least in round number 1. Daniel Jones, Drew Lock on the roster. Tommy DeVito filled in well. Daniel Jones, this is going to be a make-or-break year for him. We know this. But you got $40 million that it's tied up in Daniel Jones. And yes, he's coming off the ACL injury. He's had a couple of neck injuries as well from the last couple of seasons. But regardless of who was going to play quarterback for the Giants, you need to set him up for success. And quantity doesn't always equal quality. You look at this receiver spot, just so many different guys on this roster, right? From Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Isaiah McKenzie, Jalen Hyatt, Allen Robinson's been signed, Isaiah Hodgins, Miles Boykin, Gunnar Olszewski. Just a lot of different guys, and you need that number 1. Malik Neighbors is absolutely that guy, the speedster, a guy that's going to get vertical on you. This guy is an absolute workhorse, and he definitely looks the part. He's going to be a guy that's a lot of. I think he was either led the league or led the FBS or was pretty close to it in terms of the missed tackles forced, according to Pro Football Focus. Malik Neighbors, to me, 6 foot 199. He'll be that number 1 go-to target for Daniel Jones. Then you get to round 2, Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. This is a guy. I look at the safety spot, and you've got Nubin, Pinnock, Jalen Mills. I look at Tyler Nubin. He's a guy that's going to be an instant starter for them. There's no doubt about it for me. 6'2", 199. This guy is instinctive, incredibly versatile. He can play both of the safety spots. And, I look at Nubin, and what's so impressive with him as well are the ball skills, right? 13 interceptions, 11 pass breakups to the career. This is a guy that, he's all over making plays. I'm a huge fan of his, and round 2 to the Giants, I think that's a great fit. Andrew Phillips, the corner, I look at him, and I think Drew Phillips is going to be that nickel for them. You've got Nick McLeod, you've got Deontay Banks. I think Drew Phillips can pencil him in there as a starter there at the nickel. Round 4, they get Theo Johnson, the tight end. This is an interesting pick. I thought, Theo Johnson, the Bengals made a lot of sense for me, but you got Darren Waller on the roster. Daniel Bellinger is a guy that can, he can block, he can be a receiver. I think Theo Johnson's another guy, could be that number 3 tight end. And really, I think ultimately he'll end up being the backup to Darren Waller, with Daniel Bellinger doing a lot of the dirty work as the blocker. I think Theo Johnson is a guy, the athleticism, he didn't really get to showcase it there at Penn State. But, this is a dude that ran a 4.57 40 at 6'6", 259 pounds, 39.5-inch vertical leap. Showcased his ability to move really well there at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine. I think it's a great pick for them. He's a guy that can end up being that backup. Tyrone Tracy, the running back out of Purdue. I think he's ultimately going to be the backup to Devin Singletary there. You've got Eric Gray also on the roster. Didn't really get a chance to do a whole lot, obviously, with Saquon Barkley being the bell cow. But I think with Devin Singletary, you're going to have more of a running back by committee. He's not a guy that can be the workhorse for you. And I think with Tyrone Tracy, this is a converted receiver, 5'11", 201 pounds, 716 yards on the ground this past season, 8 touchdowns, 113 receptions in his career, so just keep that in mind as a receiver. This is a guy that can also make plays out of the backfield, catching the football. He's still developing as that running back, but look, Antonio Gibson made the move. Ty Montgomery, was another guy. He made the move when he was in the league. So, there's something to be said about these guys that are moving from that receiver spot to the running back. Darius Muasau from UCLA. I look at Bobby Okereke. You've got Micah McFadden. Where does Darius fit into this group? There's Carter Coughlin and Isaiah Simmons, Matthew Adams. I just don't know if he could get lost in the mix in this linebacker group. He's a guy, though, I think special teams-wise could potentially find his way onto the roster there. Jets, Olu Fashanu, 10th overall. He's the guy that's going to be the heir apparent to Tyron Smith. You bring in the future Hall of Famer, but look, he's missed 34 games over the last 4 seasons. You bring him in, and you hope that he stays healthy. If you do, then obviously you've got that production there. But if not, Fashanu is your insurance policy and a guy that's ultimately going to be your long-term guy. Then they go after that number 3 receiver in round number 3 with Malachi Corley. I thought that maybe if Rome Odunze was available, the Jets would take him there. But if now that they didn't, and you're looking at that third round pick, first pick in round number 3, they traded up and got Malachi Corley. This is a guy. Look, he's a running back in a receiver body. A receiver, but in a running back's body, and the physicality after the catch is apparent there. You bring him in, he'll be a nice complement to Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams. You get 2 running backs. This is an interesting pick. You got Breece Hall, you've got Izzy Abanikanda, then you bring in Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. These are 2 guys that are basically the same running back. 6'1", 235 is Braylon Allen, and a guy that is incredibly physical, a guy that gets downhill in a hurry. He needs to work on his pass catching. I think that's really the biggest thing. Really never got to develop that completely there at Wisconsin until his final year when Luke Fickell came in and started to throw the football to a running back. Isaiah Davis is 6 foot, 218 pounds. This is a dude that ran for over 4,500 yards and 50 touchdowns in South Dakota State. This past season, led the FCS in rushing, over 1,500 yards, 18 touchdowns. He's patient, physical between the tackles, excellent ball, pass catcher as well. But you draft 1 in round 4, 1 in round 5. You already have Breece Hall on the roster. You have Izzy as well. Where does this fit? Those are curious picks for me, from Joe Douglas. Round 5, you get Jordan Travis. You got Tyrod Taylor, who is not a long-term fit. You've got Aaron Rodgers, obviously. We know his situation, the future Hall of Famer, but his how many more years can he play? When you got Taylor, you got Rodgers, Jordan Travis. I think this is a good flyer pick and a guy that can learn from those 2 guys. Could he eventually take the reins? I think that remains to be seen. But the biggest thing is him coming back from that broken leg. When you look at the Jets and you look at that cornerback spot, Sauce Gardner obviously holding down one side. You got DJ Reed, Michael Carter II. I think Quantez Stiggers, excellent pick there from out of Toronto, the Argonauts, 5'11", 203. Talked about his story. 5 interceptions this last year at the CFL after not playing college football. I was playing in the fan league. The fan football league, and ultimately the CFL, the Argonauts, took a flyer on him. He ended up playing really well in the East-West Shrine Bowl, and the instincts for a guy who is that raw was really impressive. So getting him there in round 6, like that spot, and then you get Jalen Key, Mr. Irrelevant this year, 6'1", 208. They're out of Alabama, a good range, can cover the tight end, can cover running backs. You look at him, where does he fit in this group? You've got Chuck Clark, you've got Tony Adams, Ashton Davis on the roster. I think Jalen Key has some versatility there. he's one of those guys that I think would end up being that fourth safety on the roster, has a chance to make the team. Philly, the Eagles. How in the world does Quinyon Mitchell fall to them at number 22 overall? And then how in the world is Cooper DeJean still on the board at 40? It blows my mind that these two guys are sitting there. But again, all the historic run on all of the quarterbacks and just offensive players, insane. Quinyon Mitchell to me is a day one starter. I think if I'm James Bradbury, I'm probably looking for a new team. He's probably going to get cut June 1st. You look at Darius Slay on the opposite side. You got Keely Ringo, you got Eli Ricks, Josh Jobe, Zach McPherson. There were a lot of corners on this roster, but Quinyon Mitchell, he was my CB1. Absolutely, the ball skills for this guy were off the charts. I started watching him a couple of years ago there at Toledo and said this is a guy that's going to be a playmaker, a game changer. 6 interceptions in his career, 45 pass breakups, and then he shows up at the combine and sets the stage on fire. Just absolutely blazing the 4.33 40, 38-inch vertical leap, 6 foot 195. Also put up 225 20 times. Which shows off that physicality. That's second among all defensive backs. And look, press man was the one thing that we didn't see from him at Toledo. We knew what he could do in off coverage. We knew what he could do in zone. Press coverage, showcased that at the Senior Bowl. He's done everything that anyone has asked of him. So yeah, starter for sure. Then you've got DeJean, and just pencil him in as a nickel. You got Slay, Mitchell, DeJean. Good Lord. Then you bring in C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You've got Reed Blankenship at the free safety spot. You've really addressed that secondary, the secondary that got abused. And with Cooper DeJean, the biggest question mark is he a corner? Is he a safety? I think with putting him in there at the nickel, that allows him to be that ball hawk. And I think that's really a good spot for him. The fact that he fell all the way to 40, that's just criminal. How in the world? The rich get richer sometimes. And the Eagles absolutely landing Cooper DeJean there. Jalix Hunt, I thought that was around early there in round number 3, but I know that the Eagles really like him. And I look at that edge rush spot. You've got Josh Sweat, but obviously you traded away Hassan Reddick. You needed to get some added production. Nolan Smith Jr. is expected to get more playing time. You bring in Bryce Huff. Brandon Graham is really on borrowed time at this point. Jalix Hunt's one of those guys that's going to be an athletic edge rusher coming off the edge. So I like the pick. I like the player. I just thought it was a little early. Will Shipley, the running back there, out of Clemson. Saquon Barkley is your bell cow. You got Kenneth Gainwell. Will Shipley as that number 3 running back. I think Shipley, I would have liked to see him gone somewhere else so that he could see the field a little bit sooner. But this is a guy over 2,700 yards and 31 touchdowns in 3 seasons with the Tigers, 85 receptions as well. He's one of those guys that's so smooth as a runner. It's so hard to get a direct hit on him. Can slip tackles and a lot faster than a lot of people give him credit for. Runs in the 4.4s. Anais Smith coming out of Texas A&M, 5th round pick. This is a guy that is also an explosive return man. So when you look at him, I think he and Cooper DeJean, you've also upgraded your kick and punt returns. You look at the receiver core, you've got Devontae Smith, you've got A.J. Brown, you bring in Paris Campbell, Devontae Parker is there. Then you bring in Anais Smith, and then Johnny Wilson sitting there in the 6th round. If this guy can get motivated, that's really the biggest thing. A lot of the drops and everything, but this is a guy that when he was able to get vertical, he's a vertical threat. He really is. Even though he's this bigger receiver at 6'6", 231 pounds, guy can stride out and just run by guys. 20.9 yards per reception in his first year there at Florida State in 2022. A guy that needs to use his length to his advantage. I think this is a guy that could have come off the board on day 2, but I think the lack of overall production dropped him to day 3. Inside linebacker, you have Nakobe Dean, mainstay there. Devin White, 1-year deal, prove it. Let's see what he can do there after a down year there in Tampa last season. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., you get the legacy, playing the same team as his dad. How cool is that? he fell all the way to round 5. I thought Dallas was going to scoop him up in round number 3. Instead, they go with Maris Lufau. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is going to be a playmaker at the next level. I mean, with him playing next to Nakobe Dean, a couple of undersized linebackers flying around along the interior of that defense, I really like that pick. I think Devin White, if he doesn't play well, Trotter Jr. is going to take that spot. Trevor Keegan in round 5, I look at him. Tyler Steen was a converted tackle playing that right guard spot. I think Trevor Keegan is a guy that could end up stealing that spot from Tyler Steen. Let's see how that plays out. And then Dylan McMahon in round 6 out of NC State, a guy versatility. He can play all across the interior of that offensive line. So he can back up Dickerson, he can back up Cam Jurgens, back up Tyler Steen as well. So you love that versatility. They also have Matt Hennessy on the roster as well. So a lot of depth along the interior of that line now. I really like those picks because those are guys that can end up, if nothing else, being depth pieces. But again, I think that Trevor Keegan could battle Tyler Steen for a starting spot. Pittsburgh. Troy Fautanu. I honestly thought that Seattle would go with Fautanu just because Ryan Grubb was his college coach. But you look at Pittsburgh. I love the pick with Fautanu because that means that Broderick Jones can stay at right tackle. You have Fautanu at left tackle. You have him at right tackle, and then you get Zach Frazier from West Virginia in round number 2 to play the center. He takes over for Mason Cole, who's gone. So you completely solidify this offensive line. The left tackle spot, Dan Moore was just atrocious. Fautanu comes in, day 1 starter. Samalu at left guard. James Daniels at right guard with Frazier and Jones. Love the picks. Then I said that you needed a number 2 to team with George Pickens. I think you found it in Roman Wilson. This dude, again, Michigan didn't throw the football a ton. They wanted to run the football, but when they did, Roman Wilson was able to find a way to get open, right? I mean, this is a guy that was a vertical threat, 16 yards per reception in his career, 20 touchdowns, including 12 this past season. This guy, when you look at, he scored a touchdown on one of every 4 receptions this past season. They have 48 catches. So, a guy that knows how to make plays. Then you look at Peyton Wilson. Peyton Wilson was my favorite linebacker in this draft, one of my favorite players overall in this draft. You've got Patrick Queen, Landon Roberts right now. I mean, because he's the veteran and has starting experience there with the Patriots. I think Peyton Wilson, if he can stay healthy, that's the biggest thing. To me, Peyton Wilson could have been a first rounder like Jack Campbell had he stayed healthy. The shoulder injuries, the ACL injuries, obvious cause for concern. But this dude had 138 tackles this past season, 17.5 for loss, 6 sacks, 3 interceptions, 6 pass breakups. And then you read his overall totals. This dude, 200 solo tackles, 200 assisted tackles, 402 total tackles, 48 tackles for loss, 15 sacks, 7 interceptions, 13 pass breakups. Guy was making plays all over the field. And then he goes out to the combine and just runs a blazing 4.43 40 at 6'4" and 233 pounds. He's not completely in the same ballpark as Jack Campbell, but he's pretty close in a lot of the statistics and a lot of the athleticism. He's a little bit smaller, arms are a little bit shorter, but if Peyton Wilson can stay healthy, he could end up being an absolute steal. Then you get Mason McCormick in round 4. Now look at Mason McCormick. He can play center, but he's going to be a guard. I think he's going to be a starter. I'm looking at Samalu and Daniels. One of the two of them is going to end up eventually either leaving the team or ultimately losing their job to McCormick. I think he's a guy that's not going to lose that. Physical at the point of attack, excellent leverage, a guy that gets out. He's absolutely athletic, get out and pull. Was a 4-year starter, 3-time captain, drive blocker for sure. Very nasty individual as well. So I know that. Think about that line: Fautanu, McCormick, Frazier, all nasty dispositions, right? These are all guys that aren't afraid to throw you around. Zach Frazier was a former All-American wrestler, excellent leverage. Fatanu, you watch him getting out into space and just absolutely running guys over. They could, we can really see some physicality there with Najee Harris running the football, this season. Logan Lee, round 6. I honestly wasn't sure if Logan Lee was going to get drafted, but he showcased some incredible athleticism. 5.05 40, runs a 4.37, short shuttle, 7.16, 3-cone drill, among the fastest among all defensive tackles, 6'4", 301. He's a guy, though, you look at this group, Cam Hayward, Dean Lowry at the D tackle spot. You got Larry Ogunjobi, Isaiah Loudermilk, DeMarvin Leal. So where does Logan Lee fit into this group? He's one of those guys that I think is going to have to push for playing time there early on in camp if he wants to make a roster. And then Ryan Watts. You waited all the way to round number 6 to get a corner. So that was a bit of a surprise that they waited that long. Ryan Watts, you've got Joey Porter, you got Dante Jackson, there's Darius Rush at the nickel. Ryan Watts, tremendous length. I think that's one of the things that you can say for him. He's 6'3", 203. How fluid is he? I thought that there was some stiffness to his hips, but this is a guy. Look, he has 3 interceptions, 6 pass breakups in his career. Press corner for sure. Can be physical. I think ultimately his home may end up being at the safety spot. And I look at Mika Fitzpatrick and Deshaun Elliott, Trenton Thompson, DeMonte Casey, a couple of San Diego State Aztecs backing him up, which is interesting. But Ryan Watts could potentially battle one of those guys for a safety spot down the line as well. So that was kind of a curious pick that they waited that long to go after a corner. Seattle mentioned Byron Murphy II. This is a guy that ultimately is going to be the heir apparent to Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams was re-signed, but Byron Murphy ultimately will end up taking over the spot as the number 1 interior edge rusher. But you look at him as well. You look at Draymond Jones, Mike Morris. On the opposite side, I think ultimately Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams are going to be the 1-2 punch coming off the edge. Jaron Reed and Jonathan Hankins at the nose. That's ultimately where I think things are going to shake out. In round number 3, they get Christian Haynes. So even though they don't go with Troy Fatanu in round 1, I think Christian Haynes will take over that starting spot at right guard with Laken Tomlinson being signed to take over that left guard spot. With Christian Haynes, he's a day 1 starter for me. Out of UConn, 6'3", 317, 4-year starter, excellent size, guy that moves really well, and like I said, I think he has Pro Bowl potential. Round 4, I knew they were going to go after a linebacker. You can't lose Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks, bring in Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker, and not at least address the position once. I look at Tyrell Dodson, I think he's the guy that you could potentially supplant. And Tyrus Knight is a guy that, tremendous range there at UTEP. A guy that was making plays all over the field. 140 tackles this past season, 15.5 for loss, 4.5 sacks, 7 pass breakups as well. This is a guy that I think ultimately will end up taking over that starting spot. 5th most tackles in the FBS. He shoots gaps, does a great job slipping blocks. A guy that can play to the perimeter, can drop into coverage, get after the quarterback a little bit, does a little bit of everything. Really love that pick. Round 4, A.J. Barner, the tight end. You've got Noah Fant, there's Pharaoh Brown there. A.J. Barner is going to be a guy, fills that Will Dissly type role. Nehemiah Pritchett in round 5, really love that pick. I think Pritchett's a guy that, you've got Michael Jackson, you've got, Tariq Woolen, you've got Devin Witherspoon. I think Nehemiah Pritchett has the versatility to play both safety and corner. I think having him as that number 3 corner on the outside, really like that pick. Sataoa Laumea, I look at him. He's nice as a depth piece there at the guard spot. You've got Tremaine Ankrum that you signed for the Rams. Anthony Bradford's already on the roster. Laumea was a right tackle at Utah. But I look at him. Could he be a tackle? Could he be a guard? He's got that versatility. I think he makes the roster. DJ James out of Auburn. How in the world does this guy fall all the way to round number 6? He's 6'1", 175. He's good in press coverage, good ball skills. Played on the outside, but a guy that could potentially kick into the slot as well. He's a guy that he and Devin Witherspoon are probably going to play that nickel spot. DJ James, I think when we look at this group, Michael Jackson, Tariq Woolen, Devin Witherspoon, your starters. Then you've got Pritchett, James, and Trey Brown as the backups, and then Kobe Bryant really is a safety at this point. And then Michael Jarrell, not really sure how you pronounce it, to be honest with you, out of Finley. 6'5", 294 pounds, 40 consecutive games. This is a guy that could potentially kick inside the guard. So gives you some versatility there at both tackle and guard, but he'll be a bit of a project, a guy that will probably spend some time on the practice squad. You look at San Francisco. San Francisco sitting there at number 31 overall. The offensive tackles were gone. They didn't have the luxury of potentially getting either Amarius Mims or Tyler Guyton. There's even the shock that Jordan Morgan came off the board in round 1. So ultimately, they go with the receiver spot. And even if Brandon Ayuk sticks on the roster, you've got Ayuk, you've got Deebo Samuel, who could potentially be gone. So Ricky Pearsall, bit of a surprise in round 1 that they go Pearsall. But look, this guy, he runs excellent routes, tremendous hands. He's just not a number 1 for me. So that's why I was a bit of a surprise to see him come off the board in round 1. Renardo Green in round 2. I thought Renardo Green was a day 2 pick. There are some people that thought that that second round was a little bit rich. Not me. This is a guy that I thought played at a high level there in the ACC. 13 pass breakups this past season, just 1 interception. That's really the biggest concern. Is this a guy that can make plays on the football like that? But he's not the ball hawk by any point. But this is a guy that knows what to do when he's in the air, able to break up the passes, pretty sticky as a corner. He's a guy that can end up taking over that starting spot opposite Shavarius Ward. I think Ambry Thomas, he's beaten him out for sure. Dominic Pooney out of Kansas. This is a guy that played tackle at Kansas, didn't give up a sack. I think he's your starting right guard. He's beaten out John Feliciano and Spencer Burford. You needed to upgrade that position. You absolutely do that here with Dominic Pooney. Then Malik Mustafa, one of the more athletic and physical safeties. Talanoa Hufanga's coming off of an injury. I think Malik Mustafa as that third safety. This is a guy that is physical. He's really a strong safety. Could he play free in the event that Jair Brown goes down to injury? Absolutely. I love the pick there. Isaiah Garendo. What's happening with Elijah Mitchell? He's in a contract year. Isaac Garendo is a guy that, he doesn't have a lot of wear on those legs, right? Not a lot of wear on the tires, because he played at Wisconsin, then at Louisville, sharing the backfield in both of those. 6 foot 221, a bigger back, but runs a 4.3 340, 41.5-inch vertical leap, athleticism off the charts. Not the shiftiest guy, more of a straight line guy, but man, he's physical and a guy that can be a home run threat. I think he's a guy that can end up being the backup for Christian McCaffrey. Jacob Cowing. This is a guy that's a slot receiver, another guy who's quicker than he is fast, but dude is pretty darn fast as well. He's not the biggest receiver by any means, but when you look at Cowing, 5'8", 168, but ran that 4.38 40, and he's sudden, absolutely a guy that was incredibly productive in his college career. And Jacob Cowing, kind of took that non-traditional route, starting at UTEP before going to Arizona, but over 4,400 yards through the air, 33 touchdowns. A guy that can also help you out in the return game. I just think that they're building this receiving core up. Ayuk, Samuel, Pearsall, Cowing, Jennings. Those are probably your top 5 at this point at that receiving core. Then in round 6, kind of a curious pick, Jarrett Kingston. This is a guy that's going to provide some depth at both the guard and tackle position. 6'4", 306. Definitely, he's physical, he's strong, can be quick laterally as well. Does he have a ton of foot speed in pass protection? I thought he struggled at tackle. I think he's ultimately going to be better suited at guard at the next level. And then Tatum Bethune, undersized, 6 foot 229, but a guy that flies around and makes plays, can get skinny, can shoot gaps. Again, they love those linebackers that can fly around and make plays. They brought in D. Winters. Obviously, what's going to happen with Dre Greenlaw? That's a big question mark. You got Devondre Campbell on the roster already. So Tatum Bethune, if nothing else, will be a special teams guy. Not a bad flyer to take there in round number 7. Tampa. Graham Barton is an exceptional pick. And when you look at the interior of that line, it needed to be upgraded in a major way. And no Ryan Jensen at center. I think Graham Barton ultimately takes over that spot, especially when you got Ben Bredesen and Cody Mauk there at the guard spots. I think ultimately Graham Barton, love that pick, day one starter, has Pro Bowl potential, all pro potential in my opinion, because this is a guy just an absolute technician. 5 position versatility, so if anybody goes down, you can potentially rotate him around, especially with Robert Haynes. He's still there on the roster. Round 2, they get Chris Braswell out of Alabama. Braswell, look, you got Joe Tryon Shoyinka. Is he a guy that should be a starter at the next level? That's the big question mark. He hasn't lived up to that first round billing just yet. Yaya Diaby is their best returning pass rusher. Obviously losing Shaq Barrett hurts. Chris Braswell, not really the most explosive guy, I would say. He's more of one of those physical edge rushers than anything else. That's really, when I see him, that's kind of what jumps out to me is more of that physicality as that runner. As that edge rusher. And so that's really where I see Chris Braswell excelling. Tyke Smith in round number 3. This is a very versatile safety, a guy that can also play the nickel. I think that may be where they end up slotting him, because you've already got Jordan Whitehead, you've got Antoine Winfield at your safety spots. Tavir Thomas, I think Tyke Smith can end up sliding in and taking over that spot. Jalen McMillan, 6'1", 197 in round number 3. This is a guy that can attack the slot. I look at him, you've got Evans, Godwin, Palmer, McMillan will be our number 4 receiver. Love that pick as well. To get him there at the 29th pick in round number 3, absolutely love it. Round 4 is Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving, interesting guy. I look at Rachaad White, there's definitely a theme here, because Rachaad White is a guy who is a tremendous pass catcher, a guy that can do a lot in a lot of different phases. With Bucky Irving, you've got a guy back-to-back, 1,000-yard seasons, over 6 yards a carry, 20 touchdowns in his 3 years at Minnesota and Oregon. Also 95 receptions, including 56 this past season. So there's definitely, they want a guy that can catch the football out of the backfield. He was not the most explosive guy at the combine. That was one thing that I thought was a bit of a surprise. One of the slower guys, in fact. Ran a 4.55 40. For a guy that's 5'9", 192, a bit of a surprise. Only a 29.5-inch vertical leap, so you worry a little bit about that athleticism. But a guy that, look, you just put on the film there at Oregon. All the guy was doing was making plays, making people miss in the open field. That was really a lot of fun to watch. Then Elijah Klein in round 6, another dude who was a mauler, just mean. I think Elijah Klein could potentially take over that left guard spot from Ben Bredesen. This is a guy, he just gets out and pulls and will just throw people down. I really enjoyed watching him at UTEP. 5-year starter there. He's got long arms. Excellent. He's good in pass protection, also solid in the run game. Again, I think he's the guy that could end up being a starter early in his career there on the left side. And then Devin Culp, undersized tight end for sure. You've got K-Dot and Cokeeft, Payne Durham. Devin Culp, the undersized guy, 6'3", 231, but he ran a sub 4.5 40. I think that's really what gets him onto the roster, or why he at least got drafted. But again, undersized tight end. He's more of a kind of a buffed up receiver. So the question will be, is this a guy that can end up making the roster? I think the speed was what was intriguing. I just think he's got an uphill battle to make the roster. Which takes us to Tennessee Titans. We knew they were taking a tackle. The question was going to be who they were going to be taking. I ultimately had Latham going to the Chargers and Alt to the Titans. Just flip them. That's all we needed to do there, right? And I look at J.C. Latham. He's the guy that wanted to play left tackle, even though he was a right tackle there at Bama. He's going to get that opportunity here. Andre Dillard, that didn't work out. Jalen Duncan, not ready for a starting spot. Latham, opposite Dylan Radins or Nicholas Petit-Ferrer. And then he gets to play there next to Peter Skoronski. I really love what they've done there. Latham, Skoronski, and Cushenberry, Lloyd Cushenberry III there at center. Love those picks. Then in round 2, they get Devondre Sweat. Devondre Sweat, I had him falling only because a lot of the off-field issues. There was some big concerns there. But this dude, look, his pass rush win rate was close to 20%. a guy that carried that weight really well. I mean, he's a mammoth of a man, and he's difficult to move off his spot at 6'5", 366 pounds. But this dude is also pretty darn athletic. He can get off blocks, move down the line really well. Just his ability to get down the line was just incredible for a guy his size. Look, Jeffrey Simmons had some question marks coming into the draft himself, and the Titans didn't shy away from him. Same thing with T'Vondre Sweat. So the two of them likely lining up next to each other. T'Vondre Sweat will be a day one starter. Cedric Gray, I ultimately think he's going to end up starting over Jack Gibbons next to Kenneth Murray. I think Cedric Gray is another guy that can do a little bit of everything. If we read the stat line, this is a guy that he can play cut. He can drop into coverage. He has that sideline to sideline range. He's a volume tackler for sure. 368 tackles, including 145 in 2022. Follow that up with 121 in 2023. 29 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, 5 interceptions, 13 pass breakups, 5 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recoveries. He's got a nose for the football. Again, I think he's going to be a day one starter. Round 5, they get Jarvis Brownlee Jr. You look at the cornerback spot, they upgrade with L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie. Now you got Roger McCreary there at the nickel. I think Jarvis Brownlee, could he potentially play on the outside? He could. I think he's one of those guys. He's a feisty corner, a guy that likes to mix it up. Only 5'10", 194. Nickel's probably, he'll probably be the backup there for Roger McCreary. A good depth piece. Then you get Jaquan Jackson out of Tulane there in round number 6. I thought that was good value for him. When you look at this receiving core, you got Nuke Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd's on the roster now, which is a nice pickup. Treylon Burks just continues to move down the depth chart here. You got Nick Westbrook and Kyle Phillips. So the question really is where does Jaquan Jackson fit into this mix? That's the big question mark. I don't know if Jaquan Jackson is a guy that's going to end up making this roster, because there's a lot of bodies here now, and it was a team that needed that receiving help. But what I do love about him is the route running ability. He's very sudden as a receiver, so it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens to him. You got James Williams out of Miami, the safety. Is he a safety or is he a linebacker? He's 6'4", 231. I look at Divine Diablo and what he's been able to do. I look at James Williams. He could potentially battle Jack Gibbons, Otis Reese IV as a potential backup linebacker. You look at the safety spot. You've got Elijah Molden, you've got Amani Hooker. Could be potentially that third safety as well. I think there's some definite stiffness in his hips. The guy that's probably better off moving to that linebacker spot. And then Jalen Harrell in round number 7. A guy that could be an edge rusher. Surprised a little bit that maybe they didn't go after an edge rusher sooner. They've got Harold Landry. There's Rashad Weaver, Arden Key, Caleb Murphy, and not the Caleb Murphy from UCLA. But 6'3", 254 pounds out of Ferris State, a guy that they brought in last year's draft. Thomas Rush is also on the roster. So Jalen Harrell, I think he's the guy that's going to have to fight hard to make a roster spot when it's all said and done there in Tennessee. And then Washington will round things out with the Commanders. There was no question that Jaden Daniels was going to be the guy there. You put him with Cliff Kingsbury, who, look, his last 2 quarterbacks that he played with or that he coached were Kyler Murray and Caleb Williams. So you look at a guy who is the dual threat ability. Absolutely, you're getting Jaden Daniels to kind of fill that same role, and he's a guy that's going to be a day one starter there. Even though they have Marcus Mariota, who could be the bridge, I think Jaden Daniels ends up starting week 1. Round 2, this was an interesting pick, because I thought they could have potentially gone after a tackle a little bit sooner. But Jerzon Newton, I mean, you're talking about Johnny Newton. You already have Deron Payne. You've got Jonathan Allen there. You wonder ultimately with this pick, is it a symbol or a sign that maybe we should watch with Jonathan Allen and that contract and what happens there? Because Johnny Newton is a guy that can absolutely get after the quarterback. 27.5 tackles for loss, 18 sacks. He's a guy that he's versatile because he's such a disruptive run blocker. He's also a run defender, He's also plays with excellent leverage and can get up the field and put pressure on the quarterback. I had him coming off the board at number 23 overall, so to get him in round 2, I was shocked, kind of surprised that happened. Washington being the team to pick was a little bit of a surprise, but at the end of the day, this is a guy that is going to find his way onto the football field early and often. I look at Mikey Sainristil. You already have Quan Martin as your nickel, then you bring in Mikey Sainristil, right? He's a guy, they need corner help, period. Benjamin St. Just, Emmanuel Forbes struggled. They bring in Michael Davis, from the Chargers. Mikey Sainristil, though, this was a leader there for the Michigan Wolverines. And what I love with Sainristil is he started his career there as a receiver, and you can see the receiver instincts, the ball skills. Had 6 interceptions this past season. He's a guy that isn't afraid to mix it up. An exceptional tackler in the open field. He's a guy that I think could end up battling Quan Martin and end up potentially taking that spot over from Quan Martin. And look at Quan. He's a guy that I think could end up even moving to that safety spot and could potentially be that number 3 safety. We'll talk about the safety spot here in just one sec. Round 2, Ben Sinnott. I said he was going to go to Washington, and that's absolutely what happened. You got Zach Ertz there. He's not a long-term fit there. He's really a one-year deal with him. But you look at Ben Sinnott. He's another guy. Fullback, tight end, H-back, can do a little bit of everything. But the athleticism was really surprising when you watched him there at the combine. That was something that really jumped out. 4.68 40, a 40-inch vertical leap. Then he goes out into the 3-cone drill, runs a 6.82, which was the fastest among the tight ends. But this was a guy. Look, he was one of the top receiving options there at K-State for Will Howard. Had 49 catches, 676 yards, and 6 touchdowns this past season. Yeah, he's going to be a guy that Jaden Daniels is going to love throwing the football to. Brandon Coleman played both tackle and guard at TCU. 6'6", 320 pounds. Again, the versatility. Here's the thing. Charles Lennon was released. You've got Cornelius Lucas sitting there at left tackle. I think Coleman, he's best as a guard, but I think they may be looking at him to potentially take over for Cornelius Lucas, or at least be the backup. You've got Nick Allegretti, you've got Sam Cosme at the guard spot. Brandon Coleman could be the backup there, but then he could also, like I said, move outside and end up potentially taking over for Cornelius Lucas. Look, Cornelius Lucas is 32 years of age, played at K-State. This is a guy that's been in the league a long time. Can he hold up at left tackle is going to be the big question mark. Luke McCaffrey in round 3 as well. The brother of good old CMC himself, Christian McCaffrey ran 1/100th of a second faster in that 40-yard dash than his brother, so I think he's got bragging rights over the elder statesman there. But ran a pretty quick 40. That's the thing that was surprising, because about his hands. But when you see a guy like McCaffrey run a 4.46 at 6'2", 198 pounds, and then the shiftiness to him as well. Ran a 4.02, short shuttle, which was the fastest among the receivers. 6'7", 3-cone drill was second fastest. So just absolutely impressive lateral agility. This was a guy that was able to get open, excellent hands. I look at this receiving core, and I think he's a guy that can end up starting right away. You got Terry McLaurin, you got Jahan Dotson. Olamide Zaccheaus is a slot receiver, but I look at Luke McCaffrey, put him there as that number 3 receiver. Zaccheaus, Jamison Crowder, De'Ami Brown. Yeah, Luke McCaffrey is going to be a starter there for the Commanders. I think he'll also be a favorite target of Jaden Daniels, because he knows how to get open, understands not only the route running ability, but then has the ability to go up and make those 50-50 catches, sudden with his releases, and a guy that has the speed to make some big plays and eat up a lot of yards in a hurry. I'm a big fan of Jordan McGee's. Jordan McGee is kind of an undersized linebacker there out of Temple, 6'1", 228 pounds. I think he has excellent range. A guy that is also a really good pass rusher. He's a guy that can also drop into coverage a little bit and play zone. 6'1", 228. Yeah, he's a little undersized. But, 14 tackles for loss a season ago there with the Temple Owls. And I honestly thought that he was going to be a perfect fit for San Francisco because he fits that Dre Greenlaw mold. But 235 tackles in his career, 31 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, an interception, 10 pass breakups. And when you look at where he fits, you've got Bobby Wagner as the Mike, right? Is Bobby Wagner a long-term fit there? That's the big question mark. You've got Frankie Louvu and Jamin Davis. I think Jordan McGee's the guy that can learn from Bobby Wagner. And look, Bobby Wagner is probably not going to be there forever. He's 33 years of age. This is a guy that can come in, be a special teams ace, be that backup to Wagner, soak up everything. And I think he ends up as the Commanders' middle linebacker whenever Bobby Wagner decides to move on. Round 5, you get Dominique Hampton. A trade to get him 6'2", 215 pounds. He's played corner, so he's got some cover skills. He can cover tight ends. He's physical coming downhill. Long arms to rake up passes in the pass defense as well. Excellent. Like I said, he's the guy that's going to want to come up and hit you. Very physical. Has really good size. 109 tackles this past season when he was a full-time safety there. And 7 pass breakups as well. I think he's the guy when we look at the Commanders and we look at the safety spot. Jeremy Chin is your starter at strong safety. You've got Jeremy Reeves on the roster as well, who's a special teams guy. Dominique Hampton, I think because of his versatility, can end up being that backup to Jeremy Chin. And then finally, the last guy to talk about is Javonte Jean-Baptiste out of Notre Dame, 6'5", 239. Good length, a guy that I think is really good as a run defender, still developing as a pass rusher. And so where does he fit? I really thought he would have been best in a 34 scheme. So you look at this group, you've got Dorrance Armstrong, you've got Cleveland Ferrell, Dante Fowler Jr. You brought in a lot of guys in free agency. KJ Henry, really how's this whole group gonna fit together? It's really kind of a hodgepodge of guys that they brought in. Can Dante Fowler ever live up to that production level that we saw, especially with the Rams? That's a big question mark. But where does Javonte Jean-Baptiste fit into this group? I think ultimately he's battling KJ Henry as maybe that fourth edge rusher, that defensive end spot there with the Washington Commanders. So we've now gone through all draft picks, all 257 draft picks from all 32 teams. And so we've been able to take a look at really, where I see a lot of these players, try to make sense of it all, right? So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to be taking a look at all of the undrafted free agents. That's really what I want to do. Take a look at each roster and find those undrafted free agents and who is going to make the most sense. I mentioned one in Drake Stoops going to the Rams. I think he's a guy that could end up being that 5th or 6th receiver, probably that number 6 receiver, but a guy, still, I think, especially with the fact that Ben Skoranek was released, that bodes well for him. So again, every single year you have at least 1 or 2 guys that is brought in as an undrafted free agent. You look at different rosters, 1 or 2 guys that ends up making the roster, and you always see guys that end up flourishing and having tremendous careers. And so that's something that we need to take a look at, these undrafted free agents, and talk about who we think are the likeliest on each roster to potentially make the team. So that'll be the next podcast. After that, we'll do a quick sneak preview of the 2025 NFL draft class. Take a look at some positional rankings, if you will, some guys to keep an eye on. And then we'll shut things down for a couple of months. I'll be doing a lot of review of game film. Take a look at my notes as well.